The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 7, Dark Follows Light. The boy. Hey, freak. Doodles shut his ears to the jeering voice behind him and clutched his notebook close to his chest. His book bag weighed him down and his back ached. Just get there. The classroom door at the end of the hall took shape in his mind. He wanted to go down the stairs, not to history class. He wanted to go down around the corner, then out the front doors of the school to sit outside Run to Tree Palace, where he could be near his mother and search for her secret. Freak, the kid behind him said again, grabbing at his book bag. 2 more hours. Less than 2 hours. Just make it through history class. Doodles could already feel the sunlight, the light cedar-scented breezes. In his mind, he saw the trunk of a tree with tiny branches protruding. A mourning dove perched there, its elegant neck turning in its search for food. I'm talking to you. The voice grew louder. The hands tugged harder. He tripped. Hey, watch it, a girl screamed. Face to face with the girl, her eyes pierced into him. What's wrong with you? She squealed. In his mind, her face turned into black and white lines. He picked himself up and rushed toward the end of the hall. What is wrong with you? She yelled again. All around him, eyes glared. People laughed at him. Get there. The end of the hall. He saw the door, but the stairs called to him. Is he bothering you? The kid yelled at the girl. Doodles didn't hear what she said. All he heard was the kid rushing behind him. Doodles reached for the door knob. The kid closed in with shoving hands and angry, flailing arms. Taking his hand off the door, Doodles grabbed the kid by the shirt and pulled him against the wall. The hungry stairwell swallowed them both. Doodles heard the kids cry as they tumbled. He heard the crack of bone. He heard his notebook hit the floor. Except for his own heartbeat, silence filled his ears. The sound of feet running toward him. Then the kids' curses. A black and white penciled world surrounded him as if his notebook had to come to life. This isn't real. Not real. Not real. He muttered under the screams of the kid and the worried shouts of the teachers. In color, alive on the corner of the landing, was his green and white composition notebook, wide open for anyone to see. Crawling over the screaming, clawing kid, Doodles grabbed for his ratty notebook and pulled it to his chest, pulled it close and tight. Curtis pulled up to the middle school as the ambulance drove off. In an instant, the car was parked, and he dashed up the stairs to the main office. I'm Curtis Gentry, he said to the secretary. The women stood and motioned him toward the nurse's room. My son, he paused. John, is he okay? The boy lay back on the nurse's table, holding ice to his head. He's the lucky one. The other boy broke your son's fall and a leg in the process, she said in one breath. Hope the ambulance didn't scare you too much. We didn't want to take any chances. Another breath. Curtis put his hand to his son's hand, holding the ice, and lifted it up to see. Got a nice bump there, don't you, Doodles? She glanced at Curtis. John, honey. A click of a door in the front office called the secretary back. The principal's going to want to talk to you, if you don't mind waiting to sign him out. She looked back to the boy. I know you must be anxious to get home, John. We'll try to get you out before the last bell when all the kids start scrambling. Otherwise, you'll probably want to wait anyway. She gave Curtis a long look. He couldn't tell exactly what she was trying to convey. Sympathy? Contempt? She smiled politely, then turned to talk to the person standing in the office. He closed the door and reached for the notebook his son held close. The boy pulled it in tighter at first, then released his hold. What happened, John? Silence. Silence and scared eyes. The melting ice dripped down the boy's forehead in a steady flow, soaking his shirt. You aren't going to tell me? He felt heat rise inside to warm his face. He wanted to scream, to run, to yell and hide. But he couldn't. He was all the boy had. There were bills to pay, plus his mother's health. And Catherine. Catherine, I need you. John. He set his hand on the notebook again. I've lost your mother. Tears pushed to the surface. His voice broke. I can't lose you, too. After a moment, the boy loosened his notebook, slowly sliding it to his father's hands. Curtis cracked open to a page covered in sketches of the mourning doves in the woods, nesting, feeding their young, asleep, taking seed from the board in flight. Catherine. His heart called her name with every beat. Catherine, Catherine. Why did you leave me? Please, please help us. The door opened behind him, and the principal stepped in and extended his hand. Curtis shook it, and Mr. Cole took a seat by the door. As an obvious afterthought, he stood again and closed the door, then sat with his elbows resting on his knees. Well, I'm sorry to be meeting you under these circumstances, Mr. Gentry. Mr. Cole's voice was quiet in the low light of the nurse's office. Good news is that the other boy started it, and he should be fine. Broken leg, but no concussion. The principal cleared his throat. Listen, the bell's going to ring in a few minutes. How about I give you a call this evening? Mr. Cole opened the door and went to the table to help John up. Slowly, slowly. I think it's best if John stays home for a few days. I'll arrange to have his work sent home. He stopped when he saw the notebook and tapped it. Have you looked at these? The boy's gifted. Truly. Walking to the office door, Curtis nodded, thankful he could truthfully say yes, having just seen the doves. A knot rose to his throat. Why hadn't he seen John's art before? Catherine always. A sob tried to escape, but he choked it back. I'll call you tonight, Mr. Gentry. The door closed, and he walked with John to the car in silence. At dinner, Curtis carried a plate to his mother, who took meals in her chair now. She hardly ate anything, and he worried about her. He and John sat at the table in silence. He wanted to reach out to his son. A dozen worries ran through his head, but he couldn't bring himself to conversation. After the boy went to bed, Curtis walked out into the night with the principal's voice ringing in his ears. The man had tried to be reassuring. John was just having trouble adjusting. It would take time. The counselors are very good, he'd said. He offered a list of therapists. Numb, he walked to the trees, the old familiar path. The night enveloped him, but in his mind's eye, he saw a different time on these paths. He was a boy again, walking behind his father, who hacked away at limbs and dug out stubborn roots, creating the paths. His mother already stood in the clearing, stacking the heavy rocks she had lugged there into a circle. This will be a great place for a little fire. We can have our own powwow. She glistened with glee as much as with perspiration. Curtis, come here, boy, and help your mama. She pulled at a heavy board from the wheelbarrow she'd pushed out into the woods. He grabbed one side of the big board and let her guide him to the center of the clearing. Heading back to the wheelbarrow, she looked about and listened. Her hands went to her pocket. She lifted a bag of seed, opened it, and poured the contents onto the board they laid together. Come on, honey. She grabbed his hand and pulled him to a quiet, shaded place in the trees. Let's watch to see if they come. He sat beside his mother, listening to the hacking of limbs in the distance, the sounds of trails being built. She was soft and warm. He leaned into her and could hear her heart beating, aware of her every breath. He loved her. There's something special about this place, she whispered. He looked around at all the tree trunks and scraggly little cedars and tried to see what she meant. Nothing looked special to him, but he still liked sitting out there with her, watching for birds. He didn't respond to her statement. I don't know what it is, but there is definitely something about this place that makes my heart feel full. Her words sat on the air. Makes my heart feel full. He didn't know what that meant either, but she pulled him tight, and it didn't matter any longer. Oh, look, baby, she whispered, a mourning dove. The blaring horn of a car on the nearby road pulled him back to the darkness of the cool night. The stones loosely held their shape as a fire pit. Many a night he'd spent out there with his parents when he was growing up, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows, fixing hobo suppers. He remembered the nights after his dad died, and nights there talking with Catherine. She seemed to love the place even more than his mother. Tree Palace, she called it. He still didn't see it. A light flicked on at the house, making it a little easier for him to see out in the darkness. He sighed. "There's a lot of money sitting out here," he said aloud to the night. Starting back at the edge of the woods by the road, he counted the trees so he could tell the man in the morning how many to cut down. His grandmother closed the notebook and stroked the sore spot on the boy's head. For a long moment they smiled at each other, their eyes speaking words that went unspoken. "Some changes are coming our way, I'm sorry to tell you, but these old bones know that feeling now. I've had it a million times over. More changes are coming." She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. He wasn't afraid. He just listened. He understood and knew. "But don't you worry about a thing, Doodles, because if there's one thing I know in this life, it's that this won't be how it is forever. That's just a thing I know, a true thing. Now run and get you pajamas on. Your daddy will be in soon." She turned his cheek and held his gaze. "My heart feels all the light in the world, John. I'm excited about the changes. Won't be long now," she whispered. "It's okay. Everything will be okay." Thank you for listening to The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.